right? Okay. And I...
How you are going to use that?
Again, sorry? I make lots of money out of it. No, just kidding. Yeah, and I tend to speak too fast. So if I'm speaking too fast, just show me that I have to slow down. And if there are any questions, just ask me right away. You know, I don't want this talking, and then questions at the end. So just ask me questions as soon as you have some. Okay? Cool. So we start. What are we going to talk about? How to use games and simulations for educational purposes. So, for me, the division is not between classical learning and e-learning, but between theoretical learning and practical learning. That can be applied both for classroom learning or for e-learning. For me, just the important part is that you have some practical element in the lessons, right? That's important. So our program today, we first have a little introduction. Then I'm giving you examples of experiential learning, what that is, and a real-world example. Then we're playing a game. That will be the fun part. I mean, of course, the whole course is fun, but that will be the most fun. And then I'll guide you through a regular structure of a course in case you want to set up one yourself. And then we have a little discussion in the end. But as I said, if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, we start with the introduction. First, a little about me. I'm actually a web and user experience designer. So I'm not coming from the HR field. I have barely any experience there. So if I do something wrong, let me know. So actually, we're building websites and web applications, also for learning, but also regular corporate websites, which is quite common and well known. I mean, everyone knows how to use a website. So it's quite repetitive, nothing new in a way. But what you learn when you build websites and when you test them with people is how people interact with apps or something. That's a very interesting thing. You have to know how people perceive information and how you have to structure information in order to get them to do what you want them to do or to understand what you want them to tell, what you want to tell them. Yeah, and so by learning more and more about interaction web design, I came into the field of learning, which is sort of my personal interest. And yeah, it's sort of an extension of this field. When people are learning, it can be very intense. When they're motivated and you give them a good structure, then you can achieve a lot and you can see a lot of potential growing. So that's what I'm personally interested in. That's my company, G31. We're a small design company in Germany. That's us. I'm there for the technical part. The guy in the middle is an art director and designer, so he's doing the graphic design stuff. And the guy on the left is a writer and a conceptor. So if you ever do campaigns for companies, he's the one that is doing them. And that's our office in Germany. We like to have these storefronts because people are walking by and then they come in and then they talk to us. And two of the biggest clients are just our clients because on their regular daily work way, they're commuting past our office. So they just come in and say, "Oh, what are you doing here?" So our two biggest clients were just neighbors, sort of. That's our office in Hamburg. Similar concept. That's our team. Everyone's quite specialized. Yeah, and that's what we usually do, just to give you an impression. So usually we build corporate designs for companies, communication material like this, like a letter, or business cards, or products, or websites, as I said, or even trade fair booths. So this is all from one company. I'm just telling you that because as designers, we have a different point of view. Usually we go into a field from the outside and perceive it in a different way, so it adds up with whatever the client is doing. Okay, and my general interest, I said, is learning. And in my degrees in the university, I worked with NGOs that are conflict resolution NGOs. So they do a lot of communication training with their people. And I built a learning application. And that was my way into this training, learning, and sort of official field. And I got to know Mark Young, which is a quite well-known negotiation trainer. He's traveling around the world, and he's working, for example, for the foreign ministry in Germany and teaching diplomats there. And he has a very special approach of teaching. That's how I got to know it. His company is Rational Games, and they use games and play for teaching. So not only for teaching kids in school, but also for teaching high-level diplomats or managers in big companies. And in some countries or fields, it's still sort of not really taken seriously. You know, it's gaming. It's not really serious. Can it be made for mature people? You heard the questions yesterday, so it's still something that's not really common. Although I think it's quite effective. And yeah, Russian Games uses it on a regular basis with great success, I think. So I want to get you to get in touch with this and sort of try it out later, so that you might implement it in your own courses for your people. Okay, so what is experiential learning? Basically, it's this definition. I'll let you read through it. So basically, what they're saying is, it's the opposite of classroom learning, of university learning. You don't sit in front, you don't sit in the ranks and listen to something, and then you have a theoretical model, but you never try it. But it's important to practice. This is especially helpful when you're learning things that involve soft skills, such as communication or leadership or negotiation. You just can't do that theoretically. You always need practice. If you have a salary negotiation for the first time, you're always excited in a way. You can't go there, I learned everything, sort of. So that's how you should practice it. And there are several means to do it. You can use small games. We'll play a small game later. You can have role plays. You can have big simulations. I'll show you a longer example later. But you could also play music or involve theater. And to give you an idea, I show you a small clip of how Russian Games is training their people in negotiation, and especially in dirty tricks. So if you're negotiating with someone who is a mean person and use tricks to bring you down or to distract you or whatever, they use theater. I'll just show you the clip.
Here to ask for a raise. And this is Miss Brendis. She's here, well, to negotiate. Unfortunately, negotiations are not always win-win. What do you do when you run into a truly skilled power negotiator who specializes in dirty tricks?
Do you understand everything in the back? I couldn't connect it to the beamer, so if there's a question, let me know.
Sit down. Sometimes they start with backhanded compliments.
I am well aware of your skills and contributions to the team. I like you, Lindsay. I like the way you've been working here. You're responsible and a person who knows his place. You're more like a beaver. Yes, a beaver steadily chewing his way through a pond.
And then they tell you they've already talked to your boss.
Lindsay, Gary is your boss, and I pretty much in a way am Gary's boss. Now you don't really want to go back and bug him about all the fine print, do you?
They're alternatively sweet and threatening.
I asked to be kept abreast of this. Somebody's head's gonna roll. I'm afraid we're all in a time here, Lindsay. Lots going on, as you can see.
Sometimes they create artificial time pressure. And they threaten you with the higher-ups.
Miss Brennerson, if you don't mind, I would like to take this contract home and give it a thorough reading.
It's fine with me.
Thank you.
But unfortunately, it's not up to me. The higher-ups have told me that if I want to fill this position internally, I have to do it today. Now, you're welcome to reapply once that's happened, but frankly, between you and I, Linz, I can call you back, can't I? That E at the end of your name is really wearing me out. Between you and I, you haven't got a rat's chance of floating in this sardine can full of overachieving, underemployed Ivy Leaguers, really to work for a data plan and a free lunch.
They'll use every dirty trick in the book.
Naturally, there have already been some discussions about some major contractual adjustments we would have to make.
So, I have to decide today.
I have to decide before my salad gets here.
It doesn't really help to be assertive. And it...
Yeah, so you get the idea, right? So when we're on a session teaching negotiation, there might be these two actors, and everyone's sitting around, and they're acting like this, but live. Yeah, and you can see that especially the woman is very impressive when she's angry, and she really starts to cry, to scream at the person, and her face changes. So that's the first part. But the second part is that after this small theater play, he gets off, and then some of the participants has to go into this position and then try to negotiate with her. And she uses some of her dirty tricks that she's shown before, and the other person has to deal with it. And that can be very impressive. And mostly people are really involved in the situation and get fearful. But for example, once there was a guy who was very manly, was like, I'll bring her down, over. And she started screaming at him so much that he was like, oh, okay, at some point. So it can be really impressive. Okay, so what are the characteristics or advantages of experiential learning? First of all, it provides a safe environment for making mistakes. And making mistakes is a very important thing, because in your job people expect you to be perfect all the time. Once you make mistakes, you're somehow under, under surveillance. People don't want to catch you making mistakes again. But making mistakes is just the way we learn, right? If you ever learned a sport, I mean, okay, that's motoric, but you still have to practice this a lot until you're on a level where you can actually safely do it. And game, as the speakers yesterday told as well, is a safe environment to make mistakes. It is important to learn. So experiential learning gives you an environment which is sort of real, but it's still okay to make mistakes. And also, it's always a little element of fun in there, because you know it's not real and you can try things out. So it improves the motivation to learn. And people learn best if they are motivated well. We had, yesterday at the panel, we had the question, what's the best app to make people learn? Or what is better, a game or a classroom to learn? And I think it doesn't matter if you're learning in a classroom or through a game, as long as you're motivated. You can have people sitting in the class, when they're motivated, they're sucking up everything, right? As well as reading something online. It doesn't really matter which device you use, as long as the person who's learning is motivated. So I think that's one of the most important factors to make people learn. And games are always good to get people motivated. Okay, as I said, it's especially good for practicing soft skills, because that's what you can't learn from the books. It's also good to practice methods or procedures. You get better with that, but when you're learning communication and negotiation, it's especially good to train it that way. That's why you should always, for example, get someone when you're practicing a presentation to listen to you and to tell you what's wrong. You can't learn that in advance. Okay, and meaningful experiences improve the learning effects. If you see something like, let's say, the theater play in a course, and it's really impressive for you, then you will remember it definitely. That's also why storytelling is important, because if it's a good story, if it's a good experience, then you keep it in mind. It's better than, I don't know, you come to your office at 9 in the morning, then you work till 6 or 7 p.m., and then you're supposed to learn, and then you're not motivated, you're not concentrated. So even if you're doing your tasks and you complete them, then you won't remember them because it's not a good experience. You just want to go home. So if you have a meaningful experience, the learning effect lasts longer. Okay, so the pros, again, better motivation, a lot of practice, and the possibility to make mistakes. The cons, of course there are cons. It's hardly measurable. So if you go through a game with someone, especially soft skills again, then you ask them, usually when it was a fun session, you ask them, did you think it was good? And yeah, of course. Did you have fun? Yeah, sure. But can you say what's better now? And they're like, yeah, I think I got some practice. So you can't really measure the effect most of the time. Of course, if you're learning processes, then you can measure how long the process takes or something. But sometimes you feel that it has a certain value, but sometimes not really measurable. That's why some people don't like to learn with games because they can't evaluate the outcome in a certain way. So that's one of the cons. And another thing is games can become self-purpose. I'll come back to that later. But if you're playing too much and you don't bring it back to what you actually wanted to teach, then it's just fun. And of course, it's nice to have a fun session, but no one wants to invest 2 hours per day in a lot of fun without a learning outcome. So so you have to, as I said yesterday, you have to keep this balance between learning, but with enough game elements that people are motivated in a way. Okay, yeah. So a case study, to give you an example of a longer real-life implementation. Ration Games is using simulation games to teach negotiations on a broader level. So a simulation game is a role-play scenario, but with more people involved. For example, when there's a game we play about a refugee crisis, right? Then some of the players are the European Union, or the fictional country which represents the European Union. One is a transit country. In our game stands for Turkey. And there are 2 more parties. One is the media, which has influence on the people of the countries. And one is a sort of general church. So each participant has a task. So each group has, like, let's say 6 or 7 participants, and they have different negotiation goals. Yeah. So all the people in these groups have different goals they have to achieve, and then they start negotiating in a room with each other. They go to each other's tables, and that's a little more sophisticated than just one game. But it's a good way to provide this real-world environment where you have to go to other people, negotiate with them. Then you have your people at home that have to agree on what you negotiated. And that's the way he explains negotiation. Especially big negotiations with many parties. So important factors there, besides the actual procedures, are negotiation theory, empathy, and communication. And especially the last 2 things are something you can't teach in the classroom. So that's why the simulation is done. These are some of the materials we use in the first part. So at first, people are learning about how to negotiate. For example, bargaining is not good because usually it tends to escalate. Everyone is angry at the end, and it's not constructive. Or another point, the iceberg. Usually, let me stand here. Usually, what people tell you is their position. So let's say I want to have a certain payment. I need this money. That's what they tell you. But actually they have a house credit, or they don't have enough time or whatever, but they don't tell it. They just bring it down to money. But what's your goal in negotiation is to get the interests underneath it, right? To understand why they need so much money. Because otherwise you can make them offers like it's a daycare in the company, so they don't have to bring their children to the kindergarten before going to the company, etc. I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's important that there is actual theoretical material in the first place, so you have to learn things. But in order to practice them, there's a simulation in the second part. This is one of the tables he uses. I'll come back to that. So we have this scenario I told you about. There are 3 countries that represent the European Union and have to agree on a contract. And there's this transit country, and some refugees are coming from here through there. And that's the fictional scenario. And we also have material for that. You see these are tags for all the groups in the scenario. And there are instructions here. So once the session starts, people get into their roles, learn what they're supposed to do. I'll come back to that. And then they start negotiation, right? And we also built an app for that. So this is representing the tables that I showed you before. But it's not really important. It's not about an application you use. So the fact that we're using this application doesn't make it better. It doesn't improve the experience. It's the other way around. If they are involved into the app too much, they don't have this personal experience anymore. So involving an app is not the point. It doesn't make it better or something. You could play the game without an app, it would still be the same. It would take a little longer because we have to write down all the proposals and yeah. But it's not a magic trick to use an application. That's the important thing. Okay, and so people start discussing, right? There are phases where they walk around and discuss, and there are phases where they sit at the table to find an agreement. And people start to become very, how do you say, motivated with their role, right? So he played a role in the game, and he's very left on a political view. And this guy is very right on the political view. So you can see that it went beyond the game. They were really motivated to convince each other, and it went loud. It was fun. This is a session in Bangkok. Also, people try to start to negotiate. What's interesting there is that you also learn about personal traits. So some people have advantages. For example, they tend to be leaders, right? And that's what you discover in games. This guy took all the attention. He said, "Okay, we do this." Blah 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 blah. So when you're training your employees and you experience them, then you get to see personal traits that might be somehow positive in your working environment. And since people behave very, how do you say, get very involved in the game, they behave sometimes in a very natural and energetic way, and that's something you can see. So this was really interesting. He managed the whole game. It's good. And it gave me a lot of trouble. So this is the end of a negotiation session in Istanbul. So there was negotiation here, 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 here. And these were the facilitators. They weren't involved because everyone was so motivated. And this guy wanted to get attention but didn't have a chance. I was like, "Hear me?" And it even continued during lunch. You know, there was a lunch break, but they said, "Oh no, we have to negotiate." So they took their material with them and were barely eating, with just talking all the time. Yeah, another thing. That was in Sri Lanka. Yeah, so I hope you have an idea about the way simulations in games work. Do you have any questions so far? No?
Between role play.
So, yeah. No, you see the difference because we play a game now, which is just a small game like you play with your family at home. You don't have a scenario behind it. There's just a mechanic you do in order to understand something. But in a role play, it's much more sophisticated. You have a role, you have a scenario. It's a little bit based on the role play games, Dungeons and Dragons or something in the 80s. But let's play the game and you understand what I mean. Okay? So we built Marshmallow Towers. This game is quite famous. I hope there are not too many people here knowing it. Who knows it already? Oh, that's far too much. Okay, so can you raise your hands again, the people who know it? So here are 3 people here, 3 people there, 1 person there. You know it? Okay. Can someone from the table up there change with a person? Oh no, can someone from there come to here? So that there's sort of mixed knowledge. If someone knows the game already, it's not bad because I've seen towers collapse of people that played it several times. Yeah. Okay, so we divide each table in 2 groups. Okay, please build 2 groups on each table. So we have 8 groups. And then you build towers within these groups. We'll distribute the material now and I'll explain what we do later.
I'll explain it. So you have 20? Yes. Which is this? She said we have. Please check if it's 20.
Let me on this spaghetti stuff.
Okay. So you all have your materials, right? Okay, and the task is to build the highest tower possible with these materials you have. You can use the strings, you can use the tape, you can use spaghettis the way you want. You have exactly 18 minutes for that task, okay? No, you don't have to use everything, but you can use everything. You can break your spaghetti, you don't have to. Use it the way you want. And you can come up with a plan first and then start building. You could start building right away. Do as you think is best. If you tape the tape on the table too strong and it doesn't work anymore, then tell me, then you get another meter, okay? Okay, so we start now. If you have any questions, let me know. Huh? No. You are separated teams at the tables, right? So each table has 2 teams and you're not supposed to work together. It has to stand freely in the end. Oh, sorry. One more moment of attention, please. In the end, when your tower is ready, you have to put the marshmallow on top. And it has to stand. You're not supposed to hold it or touch it. Okay? Again? Sorry.
Whole marshmallow or can you cut it?
No, you just have to put it on top in a way. The whole marshmallow, yeah. Okay? Okay, that's even better. Again? Yeah, the full marshmallow on top. Yeah. That's in the okay.
Questions are
allowed, correct?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And can we break these things?
You can break
should
it.
Okay.
No, you can use it.
So the only restriction is this one should be on top and whole.
Complete.
Complete.
Yeah.
We can't cut it, correct?
Yeah.
It should be complete.
Exactly.
Okay, good. All the rest
No,
is
you're not
allowed.
supposed to Google.
No, we are doing research.
No, sorry. Another time of attention, please. You are not supposed to look it up on YouTube, okay? So no cheating, no research. Just build it. Although you will get miles for a creative approach.
Since we can collaborate with another team and they want two teams there.
No. You're one team. No cheating. Yeah, it's more effective. I understand. Any questions? You have 14 minutes left. 14 minutes. Yeah.
Awesome.
Talking microphone for live stream when you're walking around.
Yeah, I can do it. Otherwise they won't hear it when the camera open. Okay. Sorry. You mean you need to? Yeah, you can do it. If they want to, ask them first.
It's too hard. It's not the same. We can use all. I don't know. Let's see if those are the same. No, this is not the same. Okay, I will cut it. This watch? Yeah, let me cut it. We can do which kind of thing? This one? Yeah. No, it doesn't mix. Let's don't lose it. Yeah. I think we cut it here. Here. Let's don't lose the time and let's
I said the name. It's not realistic.
make it a little bit. Could you cut another? See how they
Sorry, I wanted to just bring it closer to
I said we went more green because we want color. Then we have the long ones, so let's start to use those long ones.
You can just put it here inside.
Let's think about the toe things. Do you think that we need No, let's lose it here. We need here. Yeah, let's do This should be kind of the here. You can tune it the bigger, Let's put it
I need the... Okay, just a second.
You know, combined with these, different.
Just a second.
Like this. So now we need this to make it. Or you put these and you put them and stick them here, right?
Thank you. Yeah. Sure, you can do it. Whatever you want. Yeah, it works. Tell the cube, not tell the cube. You have 6 minutes left. Okay, so I still need the... Yeah. 6 minutes left. Does the group have any question? I didn't say anything. Ja, das können wir machen. Das kriegen wir. So in the end it must hold the marshmallow, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the end it must hold the marshmallow, right?
Yeah.
You're aware?
I hope so.
Okay.
It must.
It must, yeah. If it's not, if the marshmallow's on top and the thing collapses, then it's not good. So it must carry the marshmallow in the end, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just make it like that. And this is better than nothing. You know what I came
And is it fun?
30 minutes for massacre.
30 minutes left.
Yeah.
Not much. But we started at 10 after 10.
They said.
Okay, I'll be 10 minutes missing. Okay. Yeah. You can compare to other groups if you want. Three minutes left. 3 minutes.
Mark, can you please come?
You're done already?
No, we want to take a picture.
With me? Oh, nice, sure. So that's quite brave to take the picture before the time is up.
Yeah, because we finished already.
Ima veleli na karika.
Sure. Oh, that's sophisticated. 1:30. 1 minute 30 seconds left. Just two?
Yeah.
Why not more?
Second masterclass, I will give you some more.
You give me more?
The first masterclasses, they give me 30 miles. 13 only.
30.
50. 30. Yeah.
30 for all the
For each
masterclass.
masterclass.
Ah, okay. So I just have these two.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, please come to an end. You got 20 seconds left. And after these 20 seconds, you have to step away from the table and raise your hands, and no one is supposed to touch the thing anymore. The tower. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and back away from the table. Back away from the table. Don't touch the tower anymore. Don't touch the tower anymore. Ah, that's so nice. Okay, no, you're not supposed to. You have to go back. You have to go back. You have to go back too. Yeah. Where's the marshmallow? Okay, go away from the table. Just no, you have to let it go. You too. I'm sorry, that's not right. The time is over. Oh, that was very nice too. Thanks. Now you have to get away from the table. It's like 1 minute past.
Okay.
Leave it. Just leave it. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Oh, raise your hand too.
I don't want.
No, it's not working that way. You have to raise your hand. Yeah. Wait. Oh, okay, and you too. That's not allowed. Okay, so you see there are still groups holding the towers, although the game is so over. Okay, we can't proceed until you stop touching the tower. Okay, so you broke the tower. No, that's not working. It's so over. Everyone saw that, by the way. Okay, please, seriously now, we need some concentration. Okay, so this is a good example of motivation in play. You see? Okay, now let's proceed. Oh, that was nice. Okay, so let's check the results. Let's all stand up and check the towers of the other teams, okay? You're still building?
He joined late.
Ah, okay, so now he gets another 5 minutes. Okay, so please get up. Please get up and come together. Stop touching your tower. Okay, so let's quickly check the results. Just quickly. Look at this team. They're still building. Okay, fine. So what did they do in the end?
We broke the top.
You broke the top, put the marshmallow level below. What would have happened if you've done that like 2 minutes earlier? If you had done this 2 minutes earlier.
We were actually discussing that, but
why didn't
we
you?
were trying to build up.
Okay.
Another last option.
Okay, so this table, this is a little sad. There are no towers here. That's okay. Yeah, that's true. Okay, and this table, oh, as well.
No, we have reprocessed, all the wasted materials.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, yeah.
I thought that was a very nice image in the end when the hotel collapsed. But to avoid shame, you already cleaned it up. So
No, we have reprocessed it.
Okay.
Another approach
okay,
to
true.
manufacturing.
Yeah, that's true. We can use them. We can reuse them. Okay. So your tower didn't work as well?
When we put this marshmallow on the top, it did not stay on.
Yeah. Okay. And you? Oh, you're still building? Okay. You see, there's a tower.
There is.
There is.
Simple.
Yeah, congratulations. 2 towers actually, but that's good. Okay. So, let's discuss. Was it fun for you? Yeah. And was it engaging? Yes. Okay, and besides the actual task, did you notice something among your team or?
Yeah, we noticed.
Yeah?
In our team that we had roles.
You had what?
Roles.
Roles. So.
Was creative or creative. And my role was it won't be static.
Yeah. Okay. So people took their. You're still building. That's amazing. You can just continue to the end of the course. So you had different roles, right? Yeah. Some of you were more leading the thing. Some of you were more going to the background, more silent. I think some went on planning, but there wasn't much planning. All the groups started building right away. Yeah. And yeah.
There was a planning here.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were more theoretical compared to others. Yeah. I can see that. Okay. So is there a good approach to the task? Did you learn something? What would you do differently the next time? Again? Sorry? Sorry, I think. Yeah, YouTube was a good approach actually. Yeah. So, but what's the best shape of building? What's the best shape for building? Shape. Triangles, right? For example, so all the towers that are standing are built in a triangular shape, right? Okay, and what about the marshmallow?
It was heavy.
It was heavy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so actually this is a design thinking. Sorry?
Heavier than we need.
Yeah, that's the point. That's actually a design thinking challenge. In this context, it was important for me what the aim is, but it was important for me to that you experience the whole task, right? So actually you use this for design thinking workshops, and there are 3 main takeaways. Sort of, it's a very practical game. You should build very early. It's not useful if you plan, because as soon as you build, you start having problems that you don't assume in the beginning. And it's cooperative. Persons have their roles, and you have to have small building cycles. That means you have to apply the marshmallow early on in order to notice how heavy it is. Because most of the teams didn't do that. I just saw 2 teams doing it. You did it pretty early, which was a good success. And you could see here that by the end, the towers were really nice and big, and you put them on top in the end and everything collapsed. So if you had done that like 5 minutes before, then you would have maybe cut your tip 2 minutes before and you would have a nice tower.
persuading them to do that.
Yeah, but that's another team dynamic, right? Yeah. So you see, that's the important part. Okay. Yeah, but the thing I wanted you to experience is that it could be fun and engaging. You could also use that for team building or for getting to know people in the beginning, and you could see the motivation very well because they were building like 5 minutes after the course. Yeah. So I think that's what was important for me, is that you just notice how engaged people can be when they're having an on-hand task in a game. And now the person who was asking the question, what's the difference between a game and a simulation, is now gone. But this is just a very simple game, right? There's no roles you had before. It's not a role-play game. So simulation is much more sophisticated and takes more time. But the games are easy, and there are hundreds of games for every purpose. I mostly prefer the games which have very simple rules and a very good outcome. There are games which are more complicated, which are not so effective, but there are very simple games, for example Red-Blue for negotiation, if you've heard of it, that are nice to play. And it's always an aha effect, and that needs to be included. Then you memorize it, and then it's a good lesson. Okay, so the beamer is gone, the projector, just a second. How much time do we have left?
15.
15? Okay. Yeah, cool. So, let's get back to the serious part, if the projector is working at some point. Yeah. So, if you want to set up a course involving a game, yeah, there's usually a regular structure that makes sense to apply. Which is, first you have a theoretical learning. So if this was an actual class, then we would have gone through the principles of design thinking first. You know, early approach, test your model early on, don't plan too much, small building cycles, etc. But that's not the point in this case. But first you have a regular knowledge transfer. You're learning, or you're teaching what you want people to learn, right? And then there's the experience and the practical part. If you don't have any theoretical model, the practice is not worth anything. So it's always the two things. First knowledge transfer, and then practice. And in the end, feedback is important. Right? If we just stopped the game, some of the towers collapsed, it was a lot of fun. Okay? But it's important to see what people did during the session and then bring it back. Right? For example, these two examples were very impressive for the fact that you have to place the marshmallow early on. But if you don't mention that, then the knowledge is lost. You know, some people might not take attention, some people might interpret it in a different way. So this feedback is the crucial thing to get the game back to the serious part. Okay, yeah, as I said, the theoretical learning is important, convey your concepts. Of course, the concepts shouldn't be too complex, because games are very simple, right? And in the second part, you have the games or simulation. It's an interactive session. You have a lot of practice and play. If you use a scenario, or if you build a game yourself, it's important that you bring it down to your core message, right? Or you have a scenario which actually explains what you do. Sometimes I see workshops where people play games that are nice to play, but they're not really on point. So it's important that it's not getting away from the topic you're teaching. And the rules have to be easy to understand. And the less complex a scenario or a game is, the more action there is, and the easier it is to understand. Right? If it takes like 50 minutes to explain a game like this, then it's too much. If the game itself is just 15 or 20 minutes too. Okay, so another thing is timing and schedule. Consider preparation time. You saw that it took quite a while until we distributed the material. We will do that ahead of the course for the next masterclass. So I'm learning as well, right? It's important to keep people in the flow. If you're sitting here and chatting and not paying attention, then it's lost time. So the prep time is important. Consider all the materials. We won't have enough noodles for the rest of the courses, so we have to get some. And the more participants you have, the more time you need. Yeah? If you have a game which works for 10 people, and then you have a big conference with 60 people, then it might take twice the time or something. That's an important factor. Also, all this is an iterative process. If you use a game one time, you might learn a lot. You might learn even more on the second time, and it evolves. So you always have to pay attention to what you're doing and to what the participants are doing in order to improve this. Okay, that's why you have to take notes for individual feedback. You know, if this was if this was an assessment session, I could go to a person and say, okay, give the others more room. Don't implement your ideas too early without discussion or something like this. And also let people make mistakes. Yeah. In some structures, people say, don't do it like this, but that's not how people learn, right? You could go to a table and say, okay, put the marshmallow on top, you see that it falls. But then they won't have the experience that the tower collapses in the end and everyone's like, ah! So the memory is a different one. So it's important to let people make mistakes, and it's okay because it's a learning environment. And in the end, as I said, you need to lead the participants' actions back to what you want them to learn. That's why you have to take notes in the first place. And a side effect of everything is that you can appreciate individual characteristics. If someone is a good leader or has a good way of, let's say, planning or something, you can see that. And then you can also use it within your company or within your project or whatever. So this is another good thing. Okay, I prefer feedback sessions in a way that people discuss what they were doing, because it's also more engaging than someone standing in the front, right? If you say, okay, you did this, 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 then something else, then if people say, yeah, we might come up with a different model or something. So self-reflective discussion is nice usually. And you can comment their behavior, of course, in a way that is not somehow demotivating or personally insulting, but it's important to bring back the action and connect the learning points in the end. As I said, feedback is an important thing. Without feedback, it's just fun. And of course, it's nice to play a fun game, but it's not the aim of the whole thing. Yeah. And as a summary, create simple, effective scenarios or games. Be aware of the complexity. Improve the timing over time. And take notes. And address the learning points in the feedback phase. So you can enhance this with every time you play the game. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we can have a little discussion if you have questions. I think we have 5 minutes left. 10. Oh, okay. So that's good. Are there any questions? Yeah?
Can you advise some modern instruments for putting this gamification for the first time in the company?
Again, sorry? Or use this.
Can you advise some modern instruments and for setting it for the company for the first time gamification?
Okay, yeah, so I think this is a very important point. How do you set this up the first time in a company? As you see, the games themselves might be very simple. You need a lot of materials for this game, so it's a more complex game. There are games which just involve a tennis ball, or which involve nothing at all. You just have to have your environment. So the implementation is not the important thing. What's important is the culture of the company, that it accepts game-based learning, right? So if you, in your project, do this, and your boss or colleagues are not fine with that, and there's a lot of discussion in the company, it's not working. It might work for this one session, but the thing is that it has to be taken seriously as a mean of learning, right? So implementing a game is not, it depends on the game. There's no, I don't know, there's no certain approach for all the games. There's no application which tells you, okay, this game for this field or whatever. So the actual implementation depends on you, but you have to find or create a fitting surrounding. That's important. I don't know, how is it in your companies? Did you experience game-based learning in this way already? Yeah? And was it perceived well?
Yes, it's always perceived well.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
I use it even in recruiting process.
Yeah? Yes. But I still can imagine that there are some people who, I don't know, don't accept games generally.
In the group of their managers.
Yeah. So I think that's a crucial point, to have the culture in the company, or to have participants willing to get involved. Otherwise, they're just sitting like this.
And, if you have this kind of people, it's not good for your company.
Yeah, okay, that's a different thing.
This kind of
yeah.
Because there are people that are never happy, or you cannot involve them in anything. They're skeptical people.
Yeah, I think that's a very
In general, it's not. They are not very good performers.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's a very basic discussion how to motivate your workers in a way. I mean, that's not part of the game field. That's a general problem that's always there. If people are not motivated, of course, the outcome is not as good. But I think games might be a good way of getting people being more motivated to learn a specific field. So it might be productive to get them being open to a game, and then they have some fun and might be more motivated in the end.
Facilitation skills also, it's very important.
Again, sorry?
Facilitation skills.
Yeah, facilitation skills, yeah. Yeah, of course.
Especially when you have such member in the group that, because we have the situations, for example, I'm from the gambling company, and every time we play such games, they have so much passion, and no one wants to lose. And
yeah, sure.
You can never end this game. I mean, and in this case, you should always know when to stop them and how to negotiate and go to the end and make a summary of the game. So the facilitator has a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there are people who are very good at facilitation, very good at motivating people or at explaining. That's what I described in the beginning. That's how I went from making websites, how you estimate how people behave, to giving workshops, which is very interesting for me. But I'm still learning as well. The next game will be much more fluid in the next masterclass. So, yeah, of course, you need people who are actually able to facilitate in a good way. Otherwise, it might be boring. But generally, interactive sessions are more encouraging than just frontal lessons in a way. Yeah. And I think this is a matter of interest. If you're interested in these methods of learning, then you get better in a natural way, right? When you implement them several times and you're motivated and you have fun, then you naturally want to learn more or get better. Yeah. I think for some people it's not the right way. If you have complex models and you want to convey them in a frontal way, then it's fine too. Not everyone should be forced to use games, but yeah, they have their advantages. Yeah?
You said Google. Can you replace some other source to find those games?
Google. No, I mean there are some books. I brought one book to the treasure. What would you say? Yeah, the treasure. Treasure Isle, right? Which was a summary of games, especially meant for HR, for specific purposes like team building. It's Tiagi's 100 Games. This specific book. But basically, you can find that everywhere. You could Google game exercises on team building, for example, and you will find lots of YouTube videos or descriptions. Some of them are bad, of course. Some of them are better. But also you can search for books. But that's not a problem. You could easily find games for a lot of purposes. What's more of a problem is to find out if they are actually good. You have to implement them in order to find out if it works. If all the groups were sitting here being bored, then the game wouldn't work. But you just have to, as with the game itself, you have to do it in order to learn. And after a while, you have some games for your purposes that work well, and then you use them, then you improve them, and yeah, then you have a set of games which works.
And the book is, where can I find the book?
The book? Yeah. I can just quickly search for it, although I'm not sure if I'm supposed to make some commercials.
It's fine in Armenia.
So obviously there's also PDF you can download. You see, you can also make a lot of money off books with games. So that's especially useful in HR, I read, but I didn't use it myself so far, so I can't tell if the games are especially good or bad. But I thought it's a nice starting point if you want to implement games. But as I said, it's not the only source. You can Google it and you can find a lot of games you can play. Any other questions? Okay, if you have something later, just approach me and we'll have a discussion. And yeah, then thank you for the whole session. And of course, networking is important, so connect if you want. Yeah. Thanks. Oh, there are miles, sorry. Okay, so I just have 2 times 5 miles. So one 5 miles for you because you started to take a picture before the time was up. You were so convinced of your tower. And the second 5 miles is for your approach of checking it in Google, which is very good. Yeah. What do you mean? Okay, so that was that. Thanks very much.